Hey everybody. Well, we lost a great one this week, Mr. Rick Derringer, one of the great guitar players. And one thing I remember about him is he was one of those guys that was known for being fast, And when I was a kid, no one talked about shredding, and you didn't hear a lot of finger tapping, sweeping arpeggios. We might have, like, if you were into like Al Di Meola or things like that, you might have heard it some in the '70s. But mostly, I would say those were kind of modern techniques that entered metal and other guitar styles, in the '80s. But when I was a kid, they didn't have shredding and a lot of those things, but they did have some of your old school rock and roll guitar players that were just fast. They were like gunslinger guitar players. And Rick Derringer was definitely one of the guys that was just known for being fast, like I said, they didn't call him a shredder. And who else? Who else was like that? Ted Nugent and Johnny Winter. Now, I listened to Rick Derringer a lot. Of course, I knew Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo. Of course, Rick Derringer. So Rick Derringer was one of those fast guitar players, like a gunslinger guitar player. Of course, he had that, Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo. And before, he was in the band The McCoys, and they had, that song, Hang On Sloopy, which I think was a hit both in the 60s and then in the 70s. There was a video version of it that I remember, kind of a attractive young lady just dancing out there while the band was playing, and kind of seemed to get everybody's attention for a while back there in the mid '70s when I was a kid. One of the things I would say about Rick Derringer is he was a good old school rock and roll guitar player, and I don't hear a lot of good old school rock and roll guitar anymore. Everybody says, "Well, is the guitar dead or is rock dead?" And I hear a lot of ambient. I hear a lot of metal. I hear a lot of, heavy metal. I hear a lot of rock. But you know what I don't hear a lot of is rock and roll. And rock and roll, a lot of that was old Chuck Berry licks, a lot of times when I was a kid, they were that kind of music was sort of sped up, a little louder, a little grittier Chuck Berry, but it's still kind of Chuck Berry licks. And I would say Rick Derringer, Johnny Winter. Ted Nugent's another one. A lot of those old Chuck Berry lists. And I was trying to think of who else was a fast guitar player back in those days. I'm not even going to say like Eric Clapton. He's definitely a fast guitar player, but I'm not even going to say him because I don't think that was his calling card, was how fast he was. But there were guys that were just known for being fast, and one of them was Rick Derringer. Another one was Johnny Winter. I mean, people would just go hear him play, like 73, 74. He'd fill up big stadiums like Hendrix and just play fast. There's a version of Jumpin' Jack Flash with Rick Derringer and Johnny Winter on it. It's just, on that Live and album. It's just fast. Super good, super good. But, after the McCoys broke up, Rick Derringer hooked up with Johnny Winter. And that was a great pairing. Edgar Winter was around in quite a few of those too. Actually, quite a few of those. I think he kind of came in and out of it. And of course, I think Rick Derringer also ultimately did quite a bit with Johnny Winter. And then he also ended up working with people like Barbra Streisand, Cyndi Lauper. So a lot of these guys are a lot more versatile and talented than you might think. But what I'll always remember is the old Rick Derringer, Johnny Winter pairing. And I grew up with the Johnny Winter Live and album, which I've had since high school. I've still got my high school copy. And also Saints and Sinners, which I used to listen to with another guy on 8-track tape. Both Rick Derringer was prominently on both of those albums. So I'm going to show you two great old rock and roll songs that are off that album, and I'm going to kind of play them my way. I'm not even sure they're in the same key, so I guess that's not the point. We're not trying to say play it just like Rick Derringer or Johnny Winter, but and I'm sure they'd say that too. Play it your own way, but these are good old school, kind of classic, good old Good Time Charlie rock and roll with all those Good Time Charlie rock and roll licks, and which again is kind of Chuck Berry. I always call them Good Time Charlie licks, but this first one is called "There's a Riot Going On." down in cell block number 9, and that was by the Brill Building writers Leiber and Stoller. Now, the Brill Building, you might know, that was kind of like where the Wrecking Crew did out. The Brill Building was kind of like in New York City what the Wrecking Crew was in Los Angeles. Carole King, I mean, all kinds of great music came out of the Brill Building. And but Leiber and Stoller wrote a lot of those songs out of the Brill Building. I think they wrote a lot of those songs, like those girl band songs, like "Leader of the Pack," and I don't know. I don't want to. Kansas City. I'm going to Kansas City. But I always thought it was funny because they'd write these rock and roll songs for the Brill Building bands. And a lot of times, you know, they Smokey Joe's Cafe. I think that's another one. Always kind of grittier side of life type songs. But I always also found some of them kind of humorous. Leader of the Pack, almost like stereotypes of that lifestyle, as you might imagine it if you were sitting in Manhattan around a nice Steinway grand piano writing a song, or with in a tuxedo or something, you were trying to write a great rock and roll song. But this one is about a prison break. We've all I don't know, maybe some of you have been in prison, I don't know, but a prison break is probably not, a prison riot is probably not something a lot of us are familiar with, but it's a great song. So we're going to do it in the key of E. July the 2nd, it was 1963. I was serving time for armed robbery. 4 o'clock in the morning, I was laying back in my cell. I heard a whistle blow, and then I heard somebody yell, "There's a riot going on. There's a riot going on. There's a riot going on down in cell block number 9. Started down in cell block number 4, spread like wildfire across the prison door. Scarface Jones said, "Boys, you'd better get ready to run. Here comes the warden with a big old Tommy gun. There's a riot going on. There's a riot going on. There's a riot going on down in cell block number 9. About 4 o'clock in the morning, all the tear gas I got our men. We're back in our cells now, but every now and then there's a riot going on. There's a riot going on. There's a riot going on down in cell block number 9. I just did a version and actually was doing the key of D, which is a good key. It's got that kind of a hoochie coochie man, a Heartbreak Hotel. Well, since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell. It's down at the end of Lonely Street. It's called Heartbreak Hotel. I get so lonely. I get so lonely I could die. That's and D. So you can do this song in D, but we're gonna do it in E. So, but it's got that hoochie coochie man type lick. And one of the nice things about E Now, if you did it in D, I've done it. You can do it in A, and you should. If you're rock and roll, you should be able to play in different keys. What would it be if you're doing it in C? Let's see. So, but anyway, we're gonna do it in E because you got all those. You got all those open strings, and so it's a super good instructional song. It's almost like a little etude, like a lot of those. It's kind of an old blues rock type song. But you're gonna do that kind of hoochie coochie man lyric for the way I always do it when I'm in E. You're coming off the E chord, and you want right there. I guess using either finger, and then you open, then back down, then E. And you can play here. You can do it right there too. Come in on, so play. But if I'm playing those kind of open position E chords, which are great, I'm gonna play it down here. And so let me play it through you once. July the 2nd, it was 1963. I was serving time for armed robbery. 4 o'clock in the morning, that's E7. I was laying back in my cell. I heard a whistle blowing. Then I heard somebody yell. Now that's the old Hendrix Chord. Heard somebody yell. You know, Rick Beato, I saw that video. I'd never heard that term Hendrix, or I'd heard it, but I just thought it was like something me and my friends would say like 40 years ago, Hendrix Chord, 45 years ago. Gosh, I'm old. But Rick Beato had a video on the Hendrix Chord, and I just saw the thumbnail, and I knew exactly what he was talking about, this chord. But that's a good chord when you're in the E. It's kind of a hoochie coochie man chord. And if you're playing up there, and then your pinky comes up there. That's cool is because you take the G sharp of an E major chord, and then you mix it in with the G natural of a minor chord. Sounds pretty dissonant, but when you add the chord in, and then I always add the 7th. So the Hendrix chord is the 7th. So if you're playing it down here, you want these 2 fingers with the pinky. Then that sounds pretty dissonant, doesn't it? But watch when you add these 2 chords. Funny how that works, isn't it? There's not one note that's none of those notes sound good. Going one against the other, but when you put them all together, you got one of the great rock and roll blues chords ever, the Hendrix. I don't even know what it's called. I just call it the Hendrix Chord. Everybody should know what you're talking about. But so here we go. July the 2nd, it was 1963. I was serving time for armed robbery. 4 o'clock in the morning, I was laying back in my cell. I heard a whistle blowing. Then I heard somebody yell. There's a riot going on. There's a riot going on. And that's, I'm going to show you another song, Bony, Maronie, which really uses that. But those are good old in the key. Then you come up here, open. You got that big old fat open string. Then you come up to the 3rd fret, to the 4th fret on the E string, and then go up there. And you can play a B chord for the 5th. Back to the A. me do it again. It started down in the cell block number 4. Spread like wildfire all across the prison floor. Scarface Jones. Got to have a guy in prison named Scarface Jones. You know, it's not a prison song without somebody named Scarface. Scarface Jones said, boys, you better get ready to run. 'Cause here comes the warden with a big old Tommy gun. There's a riot going on. There's a riot going on. There's a riot going on down in cell block number 9. So you can do a bunch of different things to kind of finish. That's like was that 12-bar blues? It seems like. But 12-bar rock and roll blues. So and you want to, when you go into that B chord to finish, go up a fret and slide into it, a half a step. So that's like if you're doing it as a 9th chord, and I wouldn't play. So there's a ride going on down in cell block number 9. Sometimes just play those 3 strings, the A string, the D string, and then so that's a great song. I'll just kind of finish it. Let's see. I think it has kind of a short verse in it, and there are different versions. They're probably, and so I'm not. This is not like the album version exactly. So by all the tear gas I got out of man. Sometimes, a lot of times you're going to want to break there just to get that voice in. Down in cell block number 9. What is that? Down in cell block number 9. But if you want to play through that, like on an instrumental or something, there's a riot going on. Go to and walk up. There's a riot going on down in cell block number 9. All right, now I'm gonna. Well, I got a gal named Bony Maronie. She's about as skinny as a stick of macaroni. I can see her rock and rolling with the blue jeans on. Not a bit of fat, just skinny and bone. Well, I love her, she loves me, and oh how happy now we can be. Love underneath the apple tree. She's my one and only, she's my heart's desire. She's a real go-getter, she's a real live wire. Everybody's in their heads when my baby walks by. She really captures their look, she really captures their eye. I love her, she loves me, and know how happy now we can be, making love underneath the apple tree. Papa too. Just exactly what I want to do. I want to get married on the night of June and rock and roll by the light of the silvery moon. Well, I love her, she loves me, and oh how happy now we can be, making love underneath the apple tree. By the way, that's also, oh Lucille, you won't do your sister well. Oh Lucille, you won't do your sister well. Well, you're red out and dirty. I love Lucille. I'll show you another one that's also in the key of E, which is very similar. And again, I'm not sure. I think he does this one in A, so I'm gonna do it in E because I always played it in E. I played both these songs when I was a kid, especially Bony Maronie. I was in kind of a good band when I was a kid, and played around Detroit a lot. Some battle of the bands and things. We thought we were hot shots for a little while there, but despite the fact that we weren't hot shots, but we played this one, and here's how we played it. But it's a Rick Derringer, Johnny Winter song. It's just that good old rock and roll. We're gonna do it E. Now you could do it A, but it's Bony Maronie, and it's another kind of fun rock and roll song. When the last time you heard any fun rock and roll? You know, like your babe's out, you got your girl with you. She's looking good. You're dancing. Get a little sweaty, a little smoky. So, but anyway, you got that classic old rock and roll. So, I got a gal named Bony Maronie. Now, this is one of the great rock and roll riffs of rock and roll guitar, and it's in a bunch of songs. But that's what you want to do. I always played it with my pinky. I guess you could go to an open there. I always feel like I like to keep it without open strings. It just makes me feel a little more on firm ground. But I can see you rock and rolling with the blue jeans on. Not a bit of fat, just skin and bone. And I love her, she loves me. You know how happy now we would be, making love underneath the apple tree. So it's, the way I was doing it is pretty much the same. So I mean, you got the B7 chord. I love her, she loves me. That's an A7. And then you can play it up here. I love her, she loves me. And oh, how happy now we could be making love. You know how I can tell I have better guitars now? When I was a kid and I would play that, and I would go to that. You know, when you're a kid with the cheap guitar, especially back in those days, I don't think guitars were as good back then, especially the cheaper ones. You could never get an electric guitar to play those old, like, cowboy type chords. I don't like the term cowboy chords, but and so I would always play it up here. I love her, she loves me. Oh, but so let me just play it again. Well, I got a gal named Bony Maronie. She's about as skinny as a slick macaroni. I can see the rock and rollin' with the jeans on. Not a bit of fat, just skin and bone. I love her, she loves me, and oh how happy now we can be, making love underneath the apple tree. See, she's my one and only, she's my heart's desire. She's a real go-getter, she's a real live wire. She'll better turn when my baby walks by. She really turns their heads, she really catches their eye. I love her, she loves me, and oh how happy now we can be, making love underneath the apple tree. Then there'd be a solo. So let me play. Well, I'm gonna tell her mama and her papa too. Just exactly what I want to do. I wanna get married on 9 June. Rock and roll by the light of the silver moon. I love her, she loves me. And oh how happy now we can be, making love underneath the apple tree. I love her, she loves me, and oh how happy now we can be, making love underneath the apple tree. And by the way, if you've got a great singer and a great guitar and a great band, it helps to really have a good singer that can put some showmanship into those songs. They're not easy anymore. So, you look like Mitch Ryder, some of those guys that were Bob Seger that did that kind of music. Showman, that's not easy. You think that's an easy, quote unquote, easy 3-chord song, you get up there and belt it out like those guys did, man. But they'd put little stops and things in there. But just let me show you a couple of the licks you can play. I guess one of the main ones, you've got those old Chuck Berry Good Time Charlie licks up there. And those Chuck Berry licks are usually based off an F chord position. Like there's an F chord, cowboy chord, F, G. So if you're playing in the rock and roll in the key G, there's your position. A, there's your position. B, C, C sharp, D. Then we go up to here, E. And you. Those are those old Chuck Berry licks. All those guys, that old rock and roll like that was all Chuck Berry. Another guitar player who was real fast, I mentioned some, that was just known for being fast, was Alvin Lee. And the song I grew up hearing a lot was I'd Love to Change the World, which doesn't really give you a sense of it, but a lot of Alvin Lee's playing was also like Chuck Berry type licks. And you see him do that like on I'm Going Home on Woodstock. You can hear him play really fast all those old Chuck Berry licks. But there you got up there. And you got some things to do there like that. So I love her, she loves me, and oh how happy now we can be, making love underneath the apple tree. Now, and here's another thing you can do. You're up here in this position. You got it. That's your home. That's that 1-5. But then you go up here to this note and you bend it up. That's that rock and roll. That's another thing. I never hear all these younger players that they say there's no rock and roll. Why isn't rock and roll fun anymore? You don't hear. That's good old Good Time Charlie. Sweat, beer, smoke, dancing, pretty women. That's good old rock and roll Good Time Charlie playing right there. So. This one. So you can tell her mama and papa just exactly what I wanna do. I wanna get married on that June. If you're in the A, if you want, you can come down and. Now just remember, you're playing A there, but you're not in the key of A. But if the chord is A, then you can, mix that in too. Rock and roll by the light of the sun. I love her, she loves me. You know how happy now we can be. Making love underneath the apple tree. Yeah, what a great song! And those are just kind of good old Good Time Charlie songs. Nobody did them better, in my opinion, than Johnny Winter and Rick Derringer. That great pairing. And R.I.P. to both. All right, I've got a video on here on Johnny Winter, and I always felt bad. I've got some Johnny Winter vinyl too, and I always feel bad I haven't highlighted it more, because I definitely grew up listening to a lot of Johnny Winter. He was one of the great guitar players of my youth, and like I said, he and Rick Derringer were both guys that were just known for being fast, I wouldn't, Rick Derringer had Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo. I wouldn't say either of them were on the radio all that much, but people would go hear them just to play all that 90 mile an hour good old Charlie rock and roll, Good Time Charlie rock and roll. You knew you were going to have a good time, you knew you were going to have some fun if they got out there. Now Johnny Winter got into some pretty heavy blues later in his life, which is still great. But when I was a kid, he played rock and blues, obviously, but he was more rock and roll. I remember in the late 70s, he kind of disappeared. He was having some personal problems. And in the late 70s, he kind of re-emerged more as, I would say, a blues purist, like with that acoustic-y album. He did nothing but the blues. It was pretty much blues. He became a blues artist. I think because of his personal problems, he blew some pretty good opportunities he was having in the early 70s. Unfortunately, that's a very sad story. But but those early albums he did with Rick Derringer, there's some good guitar playing on there. And a lot of times, they were just doing stuff like, Jumpin' Jack Flash, Johnny Be Good, Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, or for that matter, Bony Maronie, which was a 50s song. Or There's a Riot Going On, which again was kind of an old 50s type song. But they do them great. Always like with some of the best guitar playing in town. So R.I.P. to both. And by the way, if you learn both those songs, especially some of you younger players or whatever, you learn both those songs are excellent learning device. You can spend the rest of your life working on little things to put in there, like all those. But I would just encourage you to kind of keep it simple, but learn those positions. You can play down here too. There's so many little riffs you can put into that. That's another one. Down here you got that open string, and then you go on the B string. You get that old. say, you could have some good time. I wouldn't drag it on if you're just doing the same thing over and over again, but if you've got a band that can vary it, have little stops and talk to the crowd, bring it down. And, we used to have a singer, you'd kind of bring it down, hey, how's everybody doing tonight? And that kind of thing. But then when you're finally ready to end right there. And instead of sliding into the B like you normally do, and the last time you slide it into the E, which is your home bass root chord. I love her, she loves me, and I'm happy now we could be making love underneath the apple tree. Well, so many things you can do, but R.I.P. to Rick Derringer and Johnny Winter. When I think of the one, I think of the other. And those were definitely some of the best albums that I grew up with in terms of guitar playing. There were people with, they didn't write all that many songs, I would say, either of them. I don't know about Rick Derringer, but, but Rick Derringer, I think, wrote actually more than Johnny Winter. But, man, some great guitar playing. Thanks. God bless.